What if you could change your entire life with just one wrong decision? Emily thought to herself as she took a deep breath and stepped into the dimly lit restaurant. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, mingling with the quiet clink of silverware against plates. The lighting was warm and subdued, casting gentle shadows over the tables, making the elegant dining room feel like something out of a movie. But for Emily, this wasn't a dream. This was her reality, and it was as far from glamorous as you could get. Her dress was secondhand, her shoes scuffed from a long day at work, and her hands trembled as she held the menu. She couldn't afford much here, but she promised her best friend, Jenny, she'd show up. Tonight was supposed to be a fresh start. She scanned the room nervously, muttering under her breath, "Table 7. Table 7. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had to do this. She had to go through with it. And there he was, a man sitting alone at the back of the room, his dark hair neatly styled, wearing a sharp suit. He looked just like the man Jenny had described to her, Kevin, the one she was supposed to meet for a blind date. Without thinking twice, she walked toward him, trying to steady her breath. "Hi, you must be Kevin. I'm Emily. Nice to meet you." The man looked up, startled. His eyes widened for a moment, confusion flashing across his face. Hi, Emily," he said, blinking a few times. Emily misread his hesitation as shyness and slid into the chair across from him, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "Oh, I know this is awkward, right? Blind dates are weird. Jenny told me you might be a little quiet, but don't worry. I can talk enough for both of us," she said, trying to break the ice. The man opened his mouth to correct her, but then hesitated. A moment passed, and something about her earnest smile made him pause. He'd just gotten a text from his business associate about a canceled meeting, and now he was here, facing a woman who was so different from the polished socialites he usually dealt with. She wasn't calculating or interested in his wealth. There was something refreshing about her honesty. He gave a faint smile, barely concealing his amusement. "Right, blind dates are something else," he said. Emily laughed nervously, sipping her water. "Tell me about it. Jenny's been trying to set me up for months, but I've been too busy. You know, work," she said, her voice trailing off. He raised an eyebrow. "Work? I'm a waitress," Emily admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills. Well, most of them anyway." She shrugged it off, trying to seem casual. "What about you? What do you do?" The man hesitated again, clearly deciding how much to reveal. "I work in tech," he said, his tone vague, his smile still intact. "Tech? That's cool," she said brightly, "like coding or apps. I'm terrible at that stuff." He chuckled, genuinely amused by her candidness. "Something like that," he replied. They both smiled at the awkwardness, but Emily felt a little at ease now. The conversation continued, with her sharing funny stories about her work at the diner, her struggles to make ends meet, and her dream of one day opening an art studio. Liam, as she thought his name was, laughed more than he had in months. There was something about her, something real. It was different from the usual conversations he had with business partners or women who only saw his wealth first and foremost. Emily, however, had no idea who he really was. She had no clue that the man sitting across from her, the man with the mysterious, vague answers, was actually Liam Parker, the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. And that was about to change everything. The next day, Emily woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Her heart sank as she saw the time. She was late for her shift at the diner. She scrambled out of bed, pulling on her jeans and a faded t-shirt she'd had for years. It wasn't much, but it was the best she could do. The past few months had been a blur of endless shifts, unpaid bills, and the constant weight of knowing her dreams of opening her own art studio seemed further away than ever. The small apartment she rented barely fit her, and the clutter of paintbrushes, sketchbooks, and half-finished canvases that had become a part of her, but it was all she could afford. She glanced at the clock again, grabbed her bag, and rushed out the door. The diner was a few blocks away, and even though she was running late, she knew she had to keep it together. As she entered the diner, the familiar scent of greasy food and the sound of clattering plates filled the air. Her co-worker, Jenny, gave her a teasing smile. "Late again?" she asked. Emily rolled her eyes, trying to suppress a smile. "Yeah, I know. I swear, time just slips away." Jenny shrugged, moving to the kitchen. Emily took her place behind the counter, wiping it down and getting ready for the next rush of customers. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. She told herself that every day, even when she felt like giving up. As the hours passed, she found herself lost in the rhythm of work. The steady flow of customers, the clink of silverware, and the hum of the jukebox in the corner became a comfort, a distraction from the worries that weighed on her. But then, at the end of her shift, something unexpected happened. As she was clearing off a table, she heard a voice behind her. "Emily, right?" She froze. It was him, Liam. He was standing at the door, dressed in his usual sharp suit, holding a takeout bag in his hand. He looked almost out of place in the diner, a stark contrast to the worn booths and fluorescent lights. Emily's heart raced. "Liam, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying to mask the surprise in her voice. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that sent a flutter through her chest. "I thought I'd bring you something to eat. I know you probably haven't had time to grab anything." He handed her the bag, and for a moment, she just stared at it, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of kindness. She had always relied on herself, never expecting anyone to do anything for her. But here he was, standing in front of her, looking at her like she mattered. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice soft. "You didn't have to do this." He shrugged casually. "I wanted to." Emily opened the bag and found a carefully packed sandwich, along with a bottle of water. It wasn't much, but to her, it felt like everything. She looked up at him, her thoughts a jumbled mess. I don't know what to say," she confessed. "I didn't expect this. I didn't even know if I'd see you again after that night." He chuckled lightly. "I didn't expect it either, but I wanted to see you. I enjoyed our conversation." She felt her cheeks flush at his words, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not for her job, not for her struggles, but just as herself. The person she was, underneath all the layers of bills and dreams that seemed so far out of reach. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I thought I made a fool of myself when I thought you were Kevin." He smiled again, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. "You didn't make a fool of yourself," he said gently. "Honestly, I'm glad you sat with me." She stared at him, feeling a flutter of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, something real. But she had no idea yet just how much it would change her life. The following week, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Liam. After that day at the diner, he kept showing up, always with small gestures that caught her off guard. He would bring her coffee in the mornings before her shift, leave a little note saying, "Good luck today," in her locker, and even stop by to check on her during her breaks. It was simple, kind, but something about it felt like a dream she wasn't ready to wake up from. And yet, every time she saw him, a part of her hesitated. She couldn't help but feel like she didn't belong in his world. He was everything she wasn't: wealthy, successful, polished. She was just Emily, a girl working multiple jobs to make ends meet. She knew it was only a matter of time before she'd have to face the reality of their differences. It was late one afternoon when he showed up again, this time in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed to make the whole diner pause when he walked in. He wasn't just dressed well. He looked like someone important, someone who belonged in boardrooms, not the greasy little diner where she worked. Emily tried to focus on her tasks, but she couldn't shake the feeling of his presence in the room. When he finally caught her eye, he waved, his smile still as warm as ever. She hesitated for a moment, then made her way over to his table, taking a deep breath as she approached. "Hi, Liam," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What can I get you today?" "Just a coffee, and maybe your company for a bit," he said with a grin that sent a small flutter through her chest. She chuckled nervously, setting down the coffee cup he'd asked for. "I don't think I have time for company right now," she said, glancing at the clock. "I'm about to start my shift, and the place is about to get busy." "I can wait," he said, his eyes softening. "Take a break, Emily. You've been working nonstop. You deserve a moment." She bit her lip, the offer tempting but also terrifying. She didn't want to seem ungrateful, but the weight of her responsibilities always made her feel like she couldn't take a break. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't afford to slow down. I need every shift, every dollar." "I understand," Liam said, nodding slowly. "But you should take care of yourself too. You don't have to do it all alone." His words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't just his kindness, It was the fact that someone, anyone, cared enough to notice her struggle. No one had ever said those words to her, not like that. And as much as she wanted to brush it off, to tell him it was fine, that she didn't need help, she couldn't. It's hard, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Every day is hard. He reached out, placing his hand gently on top of hers. The contact was brief but warm, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. I get it, he said quietly. But you don't have to do this alone. I'm here if you ever need anything. She looked at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart flutter with a mixture of hope and fear. Maybe this was what she needed. A chance to let someone in, to stop carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders all by herself. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but sincere. She didn't know what this meant yet, or where it was going, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone. And as she returned to her work, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to this connection than she realized. The days that followed were a blur for Emily. She found herself thinking about Liam more and more. His kindness, the little things he did, bringing her coffee, checking on her during breaks, had started to feel like something she couldn't ignore. But with each gesture, a part of her hesitated. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to him that she didn't know, something she wasn't ready to face. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when it finally happened. She was wiping down a table near the window when she saw him walk in, not with the usual casual confidence, but with a slight air of purpose. He wasn't just dressed in a suit. He looked like he was here for something important. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts were a whirlwind. When he caught her eye, he smiled, a little more serious than usual, and waved her over. Emily, can we talk? He asked when she reached his table. She nodded, her palms suddenly sweaty. Of course, she said, trying to hide her nervousness. What's going on? Liam took a deep breath, looking at her with a gaze that made her feel like the only person in the room. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, his voice softer than usual. You work so hard, but I know there's more to you than just getting by. Emily blinked, unsure where he was going with this. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, you have dreams, Liam said, his tone warm. You've mentioned your art before, your passion for it. But I don't think you should be stuck here forever, struggling to make ends meet. Emily's chest tightened. She didn't want to be rude, but she couldn't let herself get her hopes up. I'm fine, she said, her voice more defensive than she intended. I've got this. I just need to keep pushing. I know you do, Liam said, leaning in slightly. But it's not just about working harder. It's about having the chance to do what you really want. Emily shook her head. I don't have the luxury to think about that, she said, a small laugh escaping her lips. I'm just trying to survive. He looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. I know, he said gently. But that's why I'm here. I want to help you get there. Emily's heart skipped again. Help me, she asked, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Liam nodded, his smile faint but sincere. I'm not asking you to give up anything, he said. But what if I could offer you an opportunity? An art gallery, a space for your work. I know people in the industry who could help you. You wouldn't have to worry about money or where your next meal is coming from. Emily stared at him, feeling like she was hearing things. You're serious? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you want to help me? He smiled again, this time with more warmth. Because I see something in you, he said simply. You're more than just a waitress. You're talented, and I think you deserve the chance to show the world what you can do. She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had spent so long just trying to survive, just trying to make it through another day, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in her. I don't know what to say, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to say anything right now, Liam said, his voice gentle. But I want you to think about it. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Emily sat there, stunned. The weight of his offer hung in the air between them, but it wasn't just about the gallery. It was about everything he had given her in those simple, quiet moments. The kindness, the belief, the chance to dream again. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a spark of hope, a glimmer of something more than just survival. Something worth living for. The next few days were a whirlwind for Emily. She couldn't stop thinking about Liam's offer. At first, it seemed too good to be true. An art gallery? A space for her work? It felt like a dream she had buried long ago, something that belonged to a different life, a life where she wasn't struggling just to make ends meet. But then, as the days went on, something started to change. She started to believe it. She started to imagine it. Her art displayed in a real gallery, people coming to see her work, maybe even making a living doing what she loved. It was a possibility she had never dared to entertain, but now, thanks to Liam, it seemed real. One evening, after a long shift at the diner, Emily sat on her tiny apartment couch, sketchbook open on her lap. Her mind was racing, filled with both excitement and fear. She had always been afraid to take risks, afraid that if she reached for something too big, she would fall flat. But Liam's words kept echoing in her mind. You deserve the chance to show the world what you can do. She couldn't deny that part of her longed for more, for a life where she didn't have to constantly worry about money, where she could create without the weight of survival bearing down on her. But could she really trust Liam? Could she trust someone who had so much while she had so little? She looked at the sketch in her book, a piece she had started working on weeks ago, but never finished. It was a design for a fashion line she had dreamed of creating, a dream that had felt impossible to her. But now, with the chance to have her art displayed, everything seemed possible. She picked up her phone and hesitated for a moment. She had told herself she would take her time, think it over carefully, but the truth was, she had already made up her mind. She needed this. She needed to believe in herself again. Without another thought, she dialed Liam's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Emily, he answered, his voice warm and calm, just like always. Hi, Liam, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been thinking about your offer, and I'm ready. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, she wondered if she had made the right decision. But then Liam spoke, his tone filled with sincerity. I'm so glad to hear that, he said. You've got a lot of potential, Emily. I knew you'd make the right choice. We'll get started as soon as you're ready. Emily smiled to herself, the weight that had been on her shoulders for so long starting to lift. She felt something shift inside her, like a door had opened that she didn't even know was there. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving forward, not just surviving, but actually living. I'm ready, she repeated, the words feeling stronger now. Let's do this. As she hung up the phone, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had taken the first step towards something new, something bigger than herself. And no matter where it took her, Emily knew one thing for sure. It was the start of her journey, a journey that she no longer had to walk alone. The following week, Emily was sitting in a small cafe, her sketchbook open on the table in front of her. The soft sound of people chatting and the faint smell of coffee in the air gave her a strange sense of calm. She hadn't felt like this in a long time, like she could finally breathe. Since agreeing to Liam's offer, she had been working on new designs, gathering her thoughts, and figuring out how to make her dream a reality. It wasn't easy, but the excitement was slowly outweighing the fear. She had never had the chance to focus on her art the way she did now. Her mind was filled with ideas, and for the first time, she felt like she was in control of her future. She had spent so many years running on empty, just trying to survive. Now, with the support Liam offered, she was able to truly see the potential of what she could do. Emily smiled to herself as she sketched the final touches on one of her designs. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. It was everything she had been working toward, and it was finally coming together. As she placed her pencil down, she took a deep breath, realizing that she had just created something she was proud of. She couldn't wait to show it to Liam. Later that evening, as she was getting ready for their meeting, she felt a sense of nervous anticipation. She had no idea what to expect, but she was ready to take the next step. When she arrived at the gallery Liam had set up for her, she stood for a moment outside, taking it all in. The building was large, elegant, and filled with natural light that spilled through the windows. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, Liam was waiting for her. He looked up when she entered, his smile warm and reassuring. You made it, he said. Of course, Emily replied, her voice a little shaky. I'm ready. Liam led her through the space, explaining the different areas of the gallery, how everything would be displayed, and how the opening night would work. Emily was in awe of everything. How professional and well-organized it was. How much thought Liam had put into everything. I still can't believe this is real, she said, her voice quiet as they walked past a row of empty frames that would soon hold her work. It is, Liam said, stopping to look at her. You're making it real. I just gave you the space. You're the one who's doing the hard work. Emily swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had always been the one to do everything herself, but now she had someone who believed in her. It felt like a lot to take in, but at the same time, it felt right. As they continued their tour of the gallery, Emily began to see the space differently. It wasn't just a building, it was her future. It was everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped for, now within her reach. She looked over at Liam, who was smiling at her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was just a waitress trying to make it. She felt like an artist. She felt like someone who could finally have a chance at something more. Thank you, she said, her voice full of emotion. Liam raised an eyebrow, a small smile still playing on his lips. For what? For believing in me, Emily said quietly. For giving me a chance. Liam shook his head. You did all the hard work. I just helped you open the door. Emily nodded, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. She had worked so hard for this moment, but it was more than just the opportunity. It was the chance. To be seen, to be heard, to be something more than what she had been told she could be. And with Liam's help, she knew that she could make her dreams a reality. She wasn't alone anymore. She was ready to take the next step, and she was going to give it everything she had. As the opening night of the gallery drew closer, Emily's nerves began to take over. She had spent weeks perfecting her artwork, each piece more meaningful than the last. This was her chance to show the world what she was capable of, but with every passing day, the pressure grew heavier. The gallery was going to be full of people, important people, people with money and influence, and Emily couldn't help but wonder if she belonged in the same room as them. She was still the same girl who used to scrape by at the diner, the girl who barely had enough to pay rent. How could she, someone so ordinary, stand among those who had everything? But every time she thought about backing out, she remembered Liam's words. You deserve the chance to show the world what you can do. It was that belief in her, that support from him, that kept her going. The night of the event, she stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the dress she had borrowed from Jenny. It wasn't much, but it was the best she could do. Her hair was carefully styled, and her makeup was simple but elegant. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see the girl who worked in a diner. She saw someone new, someone ready to step into a world she never thought was possible. When she arrived at the gallery, the buzz of conversation and the soft clink of glasses greeted her. The place was already filled with well-dressed people, mingling, laughing, and admiring the artwork on the walls. Emily stood at the entrance for a moment, feeling completely out of place. She had never been to an event like this before, never rubbed elbows with people who didn't have to worry about bills or rent. But as she looked around, her gaze landed on Liam, standing near the back, looking every bit the powerful businessman he was. His eyes met hers, and the moment he saw her, his face broke into a smile that made her heart flutter. He walked over to her, his usual confident stride now filled with something more, something softer, warmer. You made it, he said, his voice low but filled with pride. Emily couldn't help but smile back, though the nerves were still there. I almost didn't, she admitted, her voice shaky. I didn't think I'd fit in. Liam shook his head. You belong here, Emily. More than anyone. She looked around the room again, trying to take it all in. The paintings on the walls, the rich decor, the people in their expensive suits and dresses. It was a world so different from hers. But then Liam took her hand gently in his, bringing her back to reality. This is your night, he said, and I couldn't be prouder of you. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a surge of gratitude and fear. This was the moment that would define everything. She was finally showing the world who she was. But what if they didn't like it? What if they didn't see her worth? But as Liam led her through the crowd, introducing her to various guests, something inside her shifted. These people, these successful, polished individuals, they weren't so different from her. They had their own struggles, their own stories, and they were here to admire her work, to see what she had created. They weren't judging her, they were interested in her. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt seen, not for her past or her struggles, but for who she truly was. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was an artist, and the world was finally starting to notice. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself talking to more and more people, explaining the inspiration behind her pieces, and feeling a sense of pride she had never known before. The self-doubt that had plagued her for so long began to fade, replaced with something stronger: confidence. When the night was winding down and the last guests were preparing to leave, Liam found her again, standing near one of her paintings. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice full of curiosity. Emily turned to him, her smile wide. "I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be," she said, her voice steady. "I think I'm ready for this. For everything." Liam smiled back, his eyes shining with pride. "I knew you could do it." As the last of the guests left, Emily stood in the gallery, surrounded by her work, and realized that this was only the beginning. The future was no longer something she had to dream about. It was something she was making happen, one step at a time. As weeks passed, Emily's life began to shift in ways she never expected. The art gallery had been a turning point, but the journey didn't end there. She had spent countless hours in the studio, refining her designs, growing her portfolio, and starting to see a future she had once thought was out of reach. She wasn't just waiting for opportunities anymore. She was creating them. Liam continued to be by her side, offering support, encouragement, and, at times, a quiet presence that helped her focus. They talked about everything: art, life, dreams, and each conversation deepened their connection. She started to notice little things about him, moments that felt more personal than just business. The way his eyes softened when they talked about the future, the way he listened to her ideas with such genuine interest, as if they mattered to him, too. But as much as she appreciated their growing bond, something still held her back. She was grateful for Liam's help, but the fear of relying on him too much, of letting herself need him in a way that went beyond friendship, was something she couldn't shake. She had spent so many years doing everything on her own, building her life from the ground up, that it felt like a weakness to ask for more. She didn't want to become someone who depended on another person, no matter how much she cared for them. One evening, after another long day in the studio, Emily found herself standing at the window of her small apartment, staring out at the city lights. It was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She had a life now that felt real, one that was hers, something she had built on her own. But there was a part of her that ached, a quiet yearning she couldn't ignore. Her thoughts drifted to Liam again. He had been there for her from the beginning, encouraging her when she doubted herself, offering her opportunities she never thought would come. She remembered the first time they met, how she had mistakenly sat at the wrong table, thinking he was someone else. That moment had changed everything. She had been so unsure of herself then, but now, looking back, she realized how far she had come. And it wasn't just because of the gallery or the art, it was because of him. Liam had been the catalyst for her change, but more than that, he had become someone important in her life, someone she couldn't imagine not having around. As if on cue, her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Liam. "Asterisk, I was thinking about you. How about we grab dinner tonight?" Asterisk, she smiled to herself, feeling a warmth spread through her. It was simple, but it meant everything. She typed back quickly, "I'd love that." Later that evening, as they sat at a small cafe, the city lights flickering outside the window, Emily felt something shift inside her. She had always been afraid of letting others in, of giving too much of herself away. But as Liam sat across from her, his smile soft and genuine, she realized that maybe it wasn't such a bad thing to let someone care about her. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady, "about everything. About where I am now and how much has changed." Liam raised an eyebrow, his expression curious. "And what are you thinking?" he asked. I think I'm ready to stop doing it all alone," she said, her heart beating faster. "I've spent so much time trying to figure everything out on my own, but maybe it's okay to let someone else in. Maybe it's okay to need help." Liam's eyes softened as he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," he said quietly. "You never have to." Emily looked at him, her chest full of emotions she hadn't been able to name before. Maybe she hadn't needed him to build her life, but she realized now that she wanted him in it. Not just as someone who helped her grow her career, but as someone who could be there with her, supporting her, standing by her side. And for the first time, she felt ready to take that step, ready to trust in something deeper than just herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Liam smiled, squeezing her hand gently. You don't need to thank me. You've earned everything you have. I'm just here to watch you shine. And as they sat there together, with the world outside fading into the background, Emily knew that whatever came next, she wasn't alone anymore. She was ready for it all. The days leading up to the gallery's opening were a whirlwind of excitement and nerves for Emily. She worked tirelessly, putting the finishing touches on her pieces, but as the night approached, her thoughts were never far from Liam. Their bond had deepened over time, and it wasn't just about the art anymore. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the quiet moments when he was simply there, supporting her without expectation. It felt like a safety net she hadn't known she needed, but now, she couldn't imagine being without it. When the night of the event arrived, Emily stood in front of the mirror once again, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her dress. It was simple, yet elegant, nothing extravagant, but it felt right. She was ready. As she entered the gallery, the buzz of conversation and the soft clink of champagne glasses greeted her. The place was beautiful, just as Liam had promised, filled with the soft glow of the lights reflecting off the polished floors. The walls were lined with her work, each piece showcasing her journey, the struggle, the growth, and the dream that had now become a reality. She stood for a moment, taking it all in. This was her moment, the culmination of everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of. But as she turned to face the room, she felt a familiar hand on her shoulder. It was Liam, standing beside her, looking every bit the successful businessman he was, yet somehow still the same kind, supportive man she had come to know. You've done it, he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. You're the one who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Liam's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You believed in yourself the moment you took the leap, he said. I just gave you the space to shine. As the night continued, Emily found herself surrounded by guests, admiring her work, asking questions, and complimenting her on her talent. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel like the girl who didn't belong. She felt like an artist, someone whose work had value, whose dreams were worth pursuing. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It was the feeling of accomplishment, the realization that she had come so far. When the last of the guests had left, Liam found her again, standing in front of one of her favorite pieces. How does it feel? He asked, his voice soft. Emily turned to face him, her smile warm. It feels like the beginning of something new, she said, her voice steady with certainty. Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. Liam smiled, his eyes shining with pride. I knew you could do it, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. She had worked so hard for this, but it wasn't just the gallery or the art. It was everything that had led her here. It was the journey, the growth, and the people who had helped her along the way. Liam had given her more than just a gallery. He had given her the belief in herself that she had long forgotten. And now, standing in the space she had once only dreamed of, Emily realized that anything was possible. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was an artist. And with Liam by her side, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready for it. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Liam smiled, his gaze soft as he looked at her. You don't have to thank me, he said gently. You've earned every bit of this. As they stood there together, surrounded by her work, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The future was waiting, and she was ready to face it head on, with Liam and her art leading the way.